Hello, my name is Georgianne Ryan, and I am the Communications and Strategy Director at Attachment Circles. I'm here with our founder and executive director, Erica Komisar. We have some questions that we asked you for online on Instagram, and so we're just here to answer them and give you a little bit of a introduction into what Attachment Circles is all about and the kind of information and advice you'll get when you sign up. So we have a question here from Lee Daniels. It is, what are your thoughts on attachment and healthy ways to promote better sleep in infants and toddlers?
Well, attachment and sleep are closely connected, as we know, and the way in which they're connected is that sleeping is a form of separation, and so it's scary. And it means that for babies, when they go to sleep, that they don't know that their mothers are going to return. They don't have a sense of yet having internalized that their mothers are a permanent part of their lives. And so sleep is scary. And so one of the ways that mothers reassure babies is particularly during sleep and in the middle of the night. And that's very confusing because all the messaging in modern society tells us the opposite, that you should sleep train babies and make them cry it out and force them to get through their fears as if they're born resilient. No, they're born incredibly neurologically fragile and emotionally fragile and terrified of the world. And so you're basically ignoring the fear and the distress of your child. And I would say if you ask most mothers, they would say that when their babies cry, the instinct is to pick their baby up, and the only reason they wouldn't is because society tells them it's okay not to, and in fact they shouldn't. And so I'm now giving you permission to pick up your baby and to listen to your instincts, and the hell with what society tells you.
Someone asks as well, my ex is fighting for a 50-50 child custody. What does optimal 50-50 look like? And can it be achieved?
So 50-50 custody is a ruse. It depends on the age of the child. And the truth is that 50-50 is never even Steven. So think of King Solomon and the idea of, I don't know if you know the story of King Solomon cutting the baby in half. Two mothers come to King Solomon and say, it's my baby. No, it's my baby. And King Solomon says, right, you guard, come over here, cut the baby in half, give one half to this mother, one half. And one of the mothers steps forward and says, no, don't touch a hair on that baby's head. Give the baby to her. Do not harm that baby. King Solomon says, you're the real mother. Give the baby to the one who stood up and said, leave the baby alone. So the reason I'm saying that is because when we put our needs and our desires and our narcissistic desire for fairness aside, and we do what's best for our children. There are different points in development where babies need their mothers more, and then there's other points where babies need their fathers more. And so to respect what the child's developmental needs are and emotional needs, not your own personal vendetta for fairness. Babies are not cars, they're not vases, they're not objects, they're not inanimate objects. They are human beings who developmentally have different needs at different times. So 50-50 is a ruse because it may be when a baby is breastfeeding and under the age of 3 and is securely attached to a mother that the father doesn't have overnights but has a lot of visitation during the day. It may be that when a child is an adolescent and wants to be with let's say a boy wants to be with his dad a lot more, that the mother releases that boy a little bit more. So really adhering to the child's needs rather than your own.
So we have a question from Ashley, and she says, I was a stay-at-home mom with no nanny. How did I still end up with a child that has attachment issues?
Well, you can be physically present and not be emotionally present for one reason or another, but you can also struggle with separation. So if you attach securely, but then you had trouble with the separation part of the attachment process. So John Bowlby, the father of attachment, wrote 2 very big books. One was called Attachment, one was called Separation, because he realized that both were very important to create a healthy child. And so some mothers are better at attachment and have trouble with separation, and some mothers are terrible at attachment and just want their babies to be independent and self-sufficient from the beginning. And the truth is, to raise a healthy child, you need to be good at both attachment and separation. It's very hard for mothers to admit, but if we want to raise healthy children, We need them to attach fully, but we also need to accept that they're meant to leave us, and we want them to leave us eventually because that's a healthy child.
Please talk about ages 6 to 9 too, with like 6 exclamation marks.
So, in my books, I talk about 0 to 3, and then I talk about 9 to 25, and people often ask me, why didn't I write a book about 3 to 9? And maybe that's coming at some point, but the point is those are the competence building years. Those are the school years. We call them the school years. Freud called them the latency period. We know that it's not at all latent, that there's a lot going on in those years. But in general, we don't call that period of time a critical period of brain development in the same way. So the brain is most plastic, 0 to 3 and 9 to 25, but there's a lot going on from 3 to 9. And from 6 to 9, those are the school years. And so what children are doing in those years is they're building a sense of self. They're starting to learn what they're good at, what they're not good at, what they like, what they don't like. And it's for parents to really encourage and reflect and mirror the things that they're good at, and also help them to accept the things they're not good at. So the admiration of parents in those years is important, but not the blank slate admiration, meaning the admiration for trying, the admiration for the things that they might have as strengths, but also helping them to mourn their losses, accept their disappointments, accept their rejections, and accept their weaknesses. That's a very important part of 6 to 9. Is so at 9 they've developed at least a sense, I'm good at soccer, but I'm not good at piano, or I'm good at music and art, but I'm not good at sports. The ability to understand both your strengths and your weaknesses is what's developing from 3 to 9. The other thing that's starting to develop is a sense of gender identity. It's the beginning of gender and sexual identity is starting to form towards the end of that period, where kids will identify as a boy or a girl, and so that's also happening in that period.
Now we have sibling spacing advice. Do we have to wait 3 years before we have another baby? And if we don't, how can we still have secure attachment?
So what I say is that the longer you can wait between children, the better. I would say most people, as they're building a family, particularly because women start so much later to have families, they don't generally wait more than 2 or 3 years between children. I think that's a more common theme. I think anything less than 2.5 or 3 years is a bit of a hardship for children. We used to call it Irish twins when children were born sort of on top of one another. And the problem with that is, one, that the mother becomes depleted, so they have less of the mother because the mother is going from one child to another physically, but also emotionally. So the more that each child has an emotionally unique and present experience of that mother, the better off that child will be. So the more time between children, the better.
But on the flip side, is there such a thing as too much time?
There is no such thing as too much time. The difference is that you have pros and cons to waiting a longer period of time. The pros are that your child, the first child, gets a lot from you and feels very filled up. When the second child comes, they don't feel at all competitive or rivalrous because there's been such a nice long gap or period for them. The downside is that you don't have siblings interacting maybe as playmates in the same way because they're at different developmental stages, but siblings end up finding each other. I have a sibling who's 20 years older than me, another who's 15 years older than me, and another who's 10. And although we didn't play together when I was little, I'm very close to them now. So, although you may not have that sibling closeness when they're really little, it doesn't mean that the siblings don't find each other as adults.
And so if someone does have a 3-year gap or less, what do you recommend in terms of being able to keep that attachment security?
Well, part of the issue is that if you're going to have children in less than a 2.5 or 3-year gap, you're probably going to have to wean the child that you have earlier because generally you don't want to get pregnant while you're still breastfeeding. Many people do. I did. But it's not ideal, because then you have to wean pretty quickly. and you want to wean slowly and sensitively. So, the way you maintain attachment security is you have to have a unique relationship with each child. You have to find a way to spend unique time with each child and not lump them together. It's very common for parents when they have children that are bunched together in age that they just say, right, we're all going to go to gym class, or right, we're all going to go to the park together. Let's all go get ice cream. Everything is all together now. And children actually, although they benefit from having sibling relationships a lot and having playmates as their siblings, in the end, what they benefit most from in the early years is having a unique, loving, attentive relationship with their mother and their father. So finding individual time to be with your children, that is the challenge.
We have another question here from Isa Tessa. They ask, is going to the gym okay? Is getting your nails done okay? I feel like your book made me so scared to leave my child.
Okay, that's a good question. Yes, it's okay for self-care is very important. The book didn't talk about not leaving your child. The book talked about prioritizing your child. So you need to take care of yourself. You need to exercise. You need to go get your nails done. You need to go for a walk. You need to meet friends every once in a while. You need to, have a space to breathe. But when you leave, you need to make sure that you're leaving the baby with someone that they love, that they know, that's an alternative single surrogate attachment figure, a babysitter, a nanny, a mother, a grandmother, an aunt, somebody who is your next door neighbor who that baby considers to be an aunt. The idea is that you don't want to leave your baby in the gym daycare center. No. It's so interesting because I have mothers who would not for anything leave their children in daycare. But for some reason, they have a lapse when it comes to going to the gym. They'll say, I would never leave my child in daycare, but is it okay if I leave my child in the center at the gym? I'm like, that's daycare. You just left your child with strangers and they're going to freak out. So if you're going to go to the gym, find somebody consistent and loving and present who your baby knows and have them come 3 mornings a week so you can go to the gym and go get your nails done. So it's not that you don't go to do those things, but you have to make sure that your baby is cared for in such a way that is sensitive and empathic.
I have another question here from someone called It's Rivi. They ask, can we send our kids 3 to 4 years old to school even if they cry not to go?
So 3 to 4 years old is preschool. Yeah, so that's not daycare. So let's just define what daycare is. Daycare is anything under 3, and preschool is 3 usually to 5, sometimes to 6, depending on how old they are when they start kindergarten. Kindergarten is anywhere between 5 and 6. It's not uncommon for children to struggle with preschool. The best way to handle it is to pick a preschool that is sensitive and is not too many hours, and start very slow. Start with a very gentle separation process where you're not forced to what I call drop and run, hit and run, where you actually are allowed to stay in the classroom for the first few weeks or be right outside the classroom as they're transitioning and you're trying to help them to accommodate to maybe for the first time to having a separation experience, and then that you do it at their pace. So if the preschool is demanding that you do 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, you just say no. You're the consumer. You say, no, I'm going to do it 3 days a week for 2 hours a day, and as time goes on, I'll increase it. Look for the old-fashioned, sensitive, nurturing environments. Preschools used to only be, when you started at 3 and even 4, they started with 3 mornings a week or 3 afternoons a week, just 2 or 3 hours at a time. So definitely in the 3s, look for nothing more than maybe 3 days a week, 2 or 3 hours a day. Do a gentle separation. And then in the 4s, if they've had that experience and it's been positive, then you may be able to do 5 days a week for 4 or 5 hours a day, but you don't start there. Never start there. That's far too much separation for a child who's had, put yourself in your child's shoes. That's what I'll say. Try to imagine what it's like to be your child. If you've had no separation experiences and now you're thrown into 5 days a week, 6 hours a day, what's going to happen to you emotionally? Whereas if your mother does a gentle separation and it's only an hour and a half or 2 hours, a few mornings a week, you can handle it. And then as you become more confident, maybe you can start to handle more incrementally.
We have room for a few more questions. One is from Sharon, and she asks, how can a dual income household or a single parent make attachment parenting work for them?
If you can be at least physically around and emotionally present when you need to, that's far better for your child than if you're going to disappear. And if you need to be a two-income family, I always advocate for the kinds of work that mothers can control because it has flexibility to it, and also it can be done on their own terms, either in a project way or hourly, any kind of service profession where they can do it on their own terms and have control over it and flexibility so it can accommodate to the needs of their children.
One from Ru Giala, and she asks, how can I repair sleep training mistakes from the first year of my baby's life?
So you go back to the basics. You are there as much as possible. You respond to your baby's cries when they cry. You do a lot of skin-to-skin contact. You sleep with them again. Skin to skin means skin to skin, not heavy pajamas to bathrobe. And so get skin to skin with them again. If they're one and you've sleep trained them, get skin to skin again. Let them touch your breasts, let them be close to you, let them be connected to you again in a way that repairs what has happened. And be there as much as possible so you can rebuild trust. Remember, it just takes a second to destroy trust, but it takes a long time to build it again, and you have to be patient.
We have this question from Inga Shweta, who asks, why does a mom feel that she isn't doing enough when the baby clings to dad?
So it depends on the age of the baby. I think that children will lean into their fathers if their fathers are more sensitive and empathic than their mothers. So one thing I would do is be very self-aware in terms of, is that baby clinging to your husband because your husband is more able to do things like reflect that baby's emotions or be there with emotional attunement than you are? And so that's the first question I would ask. I guess the next question is, how old is that child? Because there's about 18 months, babies begin to be very interested in their fathers because fathers are a curiosity and they're fun and they're what we call the love objects of play and playful tactile stimulation, and they're exciting and they take risks and they're physical and, and they laugh a lot and tickle and chase, and so they're very exciting. So at some point, 18-month-olds are very interested in their fathers. So it really depends. That question doesn't give me a sense of the timing of things. If it's a really newborn infant, that father may be the primary attachment figure because you are not there as much as the father is. So John Bowlby says the primary attachment figure, who is the center of that child's universe and provides them with a deep sense of security and safety, is the person that's there throughout the day, the majority of time, to soothe them when they're in distress. That is the primary attachment figure. That may be your husband, and for many women that's a very sad thing to acknowledge, but that often is the case today.
All right, so that was all of our questions. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you sign up for attachment circles to get more advice like this.